Hello, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. Today is an exciting video because I'm going to be talking about all the books that I've been reading recently because it's been so long since I actually did a reading wrap up. I think my last reading wrap up was in February. So it's been about 4 months and I've got like 11 books to share with you. I've also got a couple of DNFs which I'll also mention and talk about why I didn't get through them. But yeah, I've got 11 books that I fully read. I got another 5-star read, which I'm really excited about. And yeah, I had some pretty good books, to be honest, that I've been reading over the last few months. So yeah, let's get into it. So the first book that I DNF'd, and this is definitely more of a soft DNF, but it was Period Power by Maisie Hill. And this was actually one of the books that I really wanted to read this year. I have it on my 25 books to read in 2025, but I just didn't like it that much, to be honest. I've owned a physical copy of this book for years. I was actually gifted it because it is something I'm really interested in. It's all about cycle syncing and tracking your period and your menstrual cycle in general, and it's definitely like a topic I'm very much interested in. I just don't know if I really have the attention span for something that is quite dense. I only read the first chapter and that's about 20 odd pages and I just found it really boring, to be honest. It was just a bit too dense for me in terms of, usually when I read nonfiction, I read like memoirs or stuff where it's like a little bit more, even like more self-helpy, where there's maybe still like a sense of voice and a bit of charisma or something, but I don't know if it's just because that's literally the first chapter of the whole book, but I just found it very dense and I was just very bored. So yes, maybe the sort of book I will read at some point. I don't know if it's the sort of book that maybe I prefer on audio, but it isn't available on Spotify, and Spotify is how I read my audiobooks. So if it ever gets added to Spotify or added to my local library, I'll potentially listen to it and read it that way. But yeah, I'm going to keep my copy, so it's not like full-on DNF, but yeah, I end up just having to put it down. If you have any recommendations for a book that are around this topic, around the menstrual cycle, that maybe are a bit snappier, a bit more interesting, or even like things like documentaries or TV shows or just things like that where maybe it would be a bit more interesting, please do let me know because I really do want to look into it. I just found this particular style a bit dense and a bit boring and it just didn't really engage me. So the second book I actually DNF'd was Butter by Asaka Yuzuki, and this is another book where I think I mainly DNF'd it because I wasn't going to read it in time for my book club and I kind of didn't really want to take it into the next month because I wasn't completely engaged with it and it wasn't the sort of book that I was absolutely loving, and it was quite long. So yeah, I completely understand why people would enjoy this book. It's set in Japan and it's basically a fictional story about a woman who's a journalist and she starts meeting with a serial killer, or supposed serial killer, because she's always denied that she's actually committed these murders, but a woman who has supposedly murdered several of her past boyfriends to inherit their money. It tackles key themes such as misogyny and fatphobia in Japan, and also the comparison between kind of like how men and women are portrayed, especially in terms of like as serial killers. There's also like a big obsession with food with this book, so if you like your descriptions of food, you probably would really like this because it definitely was almost like sexual at times. It was very fascinating to hear these like really in-depth graphic descriptions of food. It was like literally the definition of food porn because it genuinely felt very sexual at times. It wasn't that I didn't enjoy the book. I probably, if it was shorter, I probably would have continued reading it. And if there weren't kind of other books that I really wanted to get to, I would have continued reading it. But it was kind of just unfortunate of when I was reading it because I had a few other books lined up that I really wanted to get to. And I knew I wasn't going to read it in time for my book club because I just hadn't really given myself enough time. I got about 160 pages in and I was just a bit like, I could finish it, but I just don't really want to like try and binge it to get it done before my book club. And then I kind of thought to myself, I was like, do I even care what happens in this book? And I just didn't really care. It's the sort of book, I think if I'd have finished it, I probably would have given it like a 6 or a 7 out of 10. It was not a bad book by any means. I prefer something a bit more plot heavy and something a bit more like medium to fast paced, whereas it is a little bit of a slow paced book, at least initially. I don't know if it picks up as it goes on, but it was a little bit slow paced for kind of like that first 160 pages. And yeah, I just couldn't be bothered to like invest another 300 pages into it. So yeah, now onto the books that I actually did end up reading. So I've got 11 books to talk to you about that I actually did read over the last few months. I read 3 in March, 2 in April, 2 in May, and 4 in June. So the first book I read in March was a book that I literally had been anticipating for ages. It's a book that I'd actually already started reading a few years ago, and then I put it down because I honestly don't know why. I think I just didn't really get into it, and I think it was when I was kind of like very early on in my book club stage as well, so I don't know if I just had to prioritise whatever the book club book was and I put it down and I just didn't pick it back up again. But that is The Vanishing Half by Britt Burnett, and this book was absolutely amazing. I really, really loved it. Basically follows twin sisters. One is called Stella and one is called Desiree, and they grow up in a black small town, but everyone is very, very light skinned. And they decide to leave this small town because they just want to like explore, go to the big city and kind of like actually have a bit more of a life outside of this like very small community. So they both decide to run away as teenagers, but when they run away, one of the sisters, Stella, decides to start passing as a white woman, and she actually ends up completely cutting off Desiree and ends up living this whole new life as a white woman, and they basically go down their separate paths. The book spans like multiple decades, and you kind of are following these two women and then later their daughters as well, which I found was really, really interesting, over the course of about 40 years. I think the book starts in the 60s, but obviously you've got flashbacks to them as children, so it kind of starts in the 50s really, but it starts in the 60s and then it goes all the way through to the 80s. So you really have like the 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s worth of family lore with these twins and then their daughters and kind of everything that happens. I just absolutely love this book. If you like books about identity, specifically like racial identity, this was just so fascinating. It was really interesting to learn more about the concept of passing. I was aware of it, but I really didn't know much about it. And as much as you can have your opinion on whether you think that it's the right thing to do or an appropriate thing to do, it is really fascinating to read about it and obviously kind of have that perspective of not only how her family, that she obviously had to completely cut off, how they feel about knowing that their daughter or their sister is now passing as a white woman when she's not. It was also really interesting to hear Stella's perspective, because Stella is the one that ends up passing as a white woman, and her perspective and how her brain really had to kind of like compartmentalize that she was no longer able to be a black woman. She had to be a white woman to keep up this facade that she'd created for herself and this life that she'd created for herself. It was very, very fascinating. I feel like the identity conversation is so interesting because you've kind of got the two sides of how you want to present and how you want others to perceive you. Also the side of how they're going to perceive you regardless. And yes, I just found this book really, really interesting. I ended up giving it a 4.5 stars. I really, really loved it. I can't believe I didn't read it sooner, like when I obviously picked it up ages ago, because I've had this physical copy for years. If you haven't picked it up yet, I definitely recommend it. It was really, really thought-provoking and just a really fascinating story and very like layered and complex characters. The next book I read was The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff, and this was another book club book, and this one I didn't really get on with that well, to be honest. I just found it a little bit boring. So this is another historical fiction, and it basically follows a young girl who is in a settlement. I think it's like they've gone from the UK to America, and it's kind of like during those first settlements. She basically decides to escape from her settlement and tries to live out in the wild on her own. That's kind of the concept of the book. It's quite short, I'll give it that. I think it was only like 250 pages or something, so it's quite short. But it's very character driven. Not much really happens. It's very much a survival story. And I think if you're interested in that time period and you're interested in survival stories with like women at the forefront, I think it's definitely a book you should check out, because it does have really positive reviews from people that kind of like that style of book. But for me, one, the language was a bit confusing. I think because it was kind of like written in that time period style, I found the language a little bit difficult to follow, which kind of like took me out of it a little bit. I actually found it a lot easier to follow listening to it rather than actually reading it. So that's something to note maybe. I just found it a little bit boring. It was very, very character driven. Not much really actually happened plot wise. And especially kind of as the book progresses, because obviously she's trying to survive and she's trying to just like live, she does start kind of like losing her mind slightly, which also then makes it even harder to kind of follow because she's kind of struggling to understand things herself. So I did only end up giving it a 2.5 stars, which is quite a low rating for me. I don't usually give things that low a rating, but it just wasn't for me. I think if you're kind of into survivalist stories, it might be worth checking out, especially if you're kind of into that sort of time period. But for me, I just found it a little bit boring and I just didn't really connect to it. The next book I read was Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins, which is obviously another prequel to The Hunger Games. So if you understand the Hunger Games universe, we've got the original prequel, which is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and then there is now another prequel, which is basically happening after The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but before the original trilogy. So Sunrise on the Reaping basically follows Haymitch and his games. Haymitch is the mentor to Katniss and Peeta. He is the one who is like the main character in this book, and it shows him as like a 16-year-old boy, how he ended up in the games and his experience of the games, and spoiler alert, how he won, because we obviously know he survives the games, so we know that he wins in some way, but we don't really know much about his games. I did really enjoy this book. It wasn't my favourite in the series. My personal favourite is Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I love that book. That was my favourite, which I think is a bit of an unpopular opinion because I've seen a lot of people not like Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, so take my opinions on the Hunger Games franchise with a pinch of salt, because if you don't like Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes, then maybe this one was your favourite, which I think is the case for a lot of people. For me, I did really, really enjoy it. I really liked learning about Haymitch's character, and I feel like it did fill in a few gaps. Personally, after reading this book, I'm not really bothered about seeing another games. Obviously, I will read whatever comes out with this franchise. If there's another games that gets released, I will read it regardless. But I would love to kind of, I guess, have a Plutarch book. I think that would be my preference because I loved Plutarch's character in this book and I find him to be a very fascinating character. I think having him and Snow and their kind of relationship to each other and their influence in this book was one of my favourite parts of it. I also felt that with this book there were loads of cameos, which I understand. I think for some of it was good because I've obviously read this now like a few months ago. Like I read this in March, I'm now filming this in July, so I've kind of had a bit of time to like sit with my thoughts on it. And at first I was very much like, there's way too many cameos. I don't need like every single character we've ever met to like come back up in this book. However, I do understand, like now I've seen people's takes on it. I get that people are saying that, oh, but this is why they were then potentially picked in later games, or this is why then this happened, and this is why like they have their involvement in the other books and the movies and stuff like that, is because they had their involvement in this book. This is kind of like what started all that fire. So I do kind of understand that. I did really enjoy this book. I liked the propaganda aspect. I thought that was really interesting, and I think that for me is where the book really shone. I think I just like the behind the scenes. I think the reason why I liked Songbirds and Snakes is because I really liked the insight into the Capitol and how the Capitol works and that kind of side of things. I'm really excited for the film. Really like the casting so far. I think the casting's really good. I don't know if when the film comes out, if maybe I'll appreciate it more. And also I think maybe on a reread, when I kind of do my Hunger Games reread at some point, which I probably will do in the lead up to the film coming out, I'll probably do like another Hunger Games reread. I don't know if my feelings of it will change once it's kind of sat with me a bit more and I read it again. But yeah, at the moment, I'm giving it 4 star. I really, really enjoyed it, but it's probably one of my least favourite in the franchise. Debate with me in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. Is it your favourite? I know for a lot of people, it's literally their favourite in the franchise. So let me know if it's your favourite, or if you kind of have the same opinion as me. But yeah, let me know. The next book I ended up reading was Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. And I really, really liked this book. This is a mystery, and it's basically set in this really remote, small town. And there's a journalist, and she's basically sent to her hometown by her boss because her boss basically tells her that there's a little girl was killed and there's another little girl that is now missing, and he thinks they're linked, and he's like, hey, didn't you used to grow up here? Could you go there and check it out? Because I think there might be a really big story. She's honestly really reluctant to go because she has a really toxic relationship with her family, especially her mother. But she ends up going on the trip. She has to stay with her parents when she goes there. You're trying to figure out who is harming these girls. I really, really like this book. I definitely say it was quite a dark mystery. Definitely a lot darker than maybe some of the other mysteries that I've read before. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I quite enjoyed it. There's a lot of like family dynamics that happen. Obviously, she doesn't get on with her mum. And there's this whole thing happening there, which was really, really interesting to read and kind of like explore. And then you've got all the other characters in the town. And yeah, I was really, really gripped reading this. I really didn't know what was going to happen. And I loved it. I really, really loved it. I loved the ending. It genuinely was a very good twist and very like well done. And yeah, I really, really liked it. It was, yeah, definitely a darker read. So check trigger warnings. And honestly, some very like unlikable characters and very questionable decisions. I can understand why people maybe don't like this book, but I really liked it. I thought it was, yeah, very, very interesting. Definitely very spooky vibes. I feel like this would be a perfect book to read in autumn, winter, because it was creepy, very, very creepy, very spooky, but maybe that's a good thing to read it when the days are lighter, so it's not scary. Because yeah, it wasn't horror, it was definitely mystery, but it was creepy. So yeah, really enjoyed it. Would definitely recommend. I think I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 in the end. So yeah, I really, really loved this. Then the next book I ended up reading was the third Heartstopper book. Now, I never really know what to say about these books because I don't want to like spoil the first book, but they're all graphic novels and I feel like everyone kind of knows what happens in Heartstopper. But if you don't know what happens in Heartstopper, it's basically about boy meets boy and spoiler alert, they fall in love. That's basically what the first book is about. Spoiler. I feel like if you've heard anything about Heartstopper, you already know that because it's been made into a very successful TV show. These are just the absolute sweetest graphic novels. I know that they get heavier and I've read the third book now and I can kind of see the darker themes coming in. Not like dark themes, but I can see it's going to get a bit more serious and a bit more grown up. Lovely books. But yeah, so I read the third book, really, really loved it. They basically go on a school trip to Paris. There's a lot of conversations around coming out and kind of like when's best to tell people, and also the fact that obviously when you're in a career relationship, maybe you yourself are out but maybe your partner isn't, and kind of navigating that. And you know, you don't want to out someone else but you want to like be out yourself. Like it was very interesting, I think, especially for that kind of younger demographic. I mean, I know there are a lot of people that are late bloomers and come into this sort of thing later in life, but I think especially for that younger demographic, I think it's really helpful to kind of like have media that discusses these sorts of topics, because I think it is really confusing to navigate, especially when you're younger. I think even just dating in general when you're a teenager is so confusing and scary. I do have the fourth and fifth book, and to be honest, I think I probably will read them both this year because I've just been really enjoying the series and I really want to continue it. So yes. The next book I read was another book that's actually been on my physical TBR for ages, and that was Circe by Madeline Miller. And can we just appreciate how gorgeous this book is? Oh my god. This book is absolutely gorgeous. I get the book just for that. Circe is a Greek goddess. I think she's mainly known for her role in the Odyssey because Odysseus does end up going to Circe's Isles and ends up staying there for a brief time. But this book is so much more than that. Basically, it's about Circe and she grows up in the goddess palaces. She is exiled quite early on in the book. I can't remember. I think it is a few chapters in, but she basically gets exiled to this island, and that is where the majority of the book takes place. And she discovers that she has a gift for witchcraft. And I really, really like this book. I would say it was a little bit slow paced for me at times and quite descriptive heavy, which if you've watched any of my videos before, you know I'm not really like that good with like flowery language and stuff like that. So that did kind of put me off slightly. But the actual story itself was really, really beautiful. And I loved Circe as a character. Even though she's obviously a goddess, I feel like she really represents a lot of things that many women struggle with, and I just really loved her. I thought she was like a really beautifully written character, and I just felt so like connected to her and like really empathized with some of the things she was going through. You basically spent most of the book with her on her island and how she kind of navigates that and how she really creates a life for herself. And yeah, really, really interesting. Very, very interesting. I didn't really know anything about Greek mythology. I know like a couple of Greek myths just from like learning them in primary school, but I really don't know much about Greek mythology at all, and you don't need to read this book. but it is very, very interesting to kind of like see how she fits into different stories that then maybe you have heard, and you'll kind of be like, oh yeah, no, that name does ring a bell. Yeah, I do remember that person. So yes, very, very, I just loved it. Very, very beautifully written book. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5. I really, really enjoyed it. And I don't know if it's a sort of book that if I read it at a different time or even reread it, I'd maybe rate it even higher. I don't know if the reason I rated it 4 was because I was in a bit of a slump when I was reading it. And I don't know if the slump was caused by the book or I was in a slump and the book kind of suffered from that. So yeah, potentially a book I would like to reread at some point in the future because I really did enjoy it, and it made me want to read more like mythological retellings because this is my first one and I really enjoyed it. But yeah, if you're into your mythological retellings or you kind of want to dip your toes into it and you want a very like female focused book and you like witchcraft elements, then I definitely recommend this because very, very beautifully written and just such, I feel like Circe as the character is the absolute heart of this book and I just loved her. I then read The Hawthorne Legacy by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is the second book in the Inheritance Game series, and if you're not familiar with what the Inheritance Game series is, it is a YA thriller trilogy and then there's kind of a couple of extra books. But it basically follows this teenager called Avery, and in the first book she finds out that she is basically the sole heir of this like multi-billionaire person's estate and like all his companies and like basically everything he owns. He has a couple of children, 4 grandkids and a few kind of like staff who receive some money, but considering he's like a multi-billionaire, I'm talking they literally receive like 100 grand or like £250,000. Like it's not much at all considering he literally has like multiple billions of dollars. She's basically informed that she's inherited this wealth and all the businesses that come with it, and like he owns like a sports team and he has this huge estate and like all these other multiple homes and all that sort of thing. And she inherits basically the majority of it, and the only condition is that she needs to stay living in his estate for 1 whole year, then she inherits it all. That's kind of like the first book, and there's obviously drama that happens because of that, because people want to find loopholes as to like how she came to inherit the fortune. She doesn't know why she's inheriting the fortune in the first place. Obviously the main guy is dead and there's not really much explanation as to why she's inherited it. And he has 4 grandkids that basically their whole shtick is that they're all very like puzzle orientated, and he's basically made them solve all these puzzles as they've been growing up, and they all have these like very much like puzzle orientated brains. And basically the 4 grandkids are like, this is a puzzle, the old man has left us a puzzle and we need to solve it, and that's like a way that we can get the inheritance, because there's no way that she's just been left this money. This is like some sort of puzzle and we've got to solve it. That's basically kind of like what happens in the first book. The second book, obviously the series continues, and I don't know if I just forgot how good the first book was or if the second book really is a step up. And to be honest, I read some reviews and I heard other people say the same thing, of saying like the second book is better than the first book, because I had an absolute ball with the second book. I don't know if it's just because everything is kind of already set up at that point, but I just loved it. Loved the romance subplot. There is a romance subplot in the first book. Loved how it developed in the second book. Really just loved all the characters. I loved the stakes. I felt like I was just absolutely binging it, especially when I kind of like got a little bit of the way through. I literally binged like the last 2/3 of the book. I think I end up reading something ridiculous like 150 pages in a day because I was just obsessed with it. Very, very addictive, very, very bingeable. If you like YA and you're looking for like a new series to start, like a thriller series, I would definitely recommend this one. It's really, really fun. I would say the first book, one of the reasons the first book I rated like 4 out of 5, and I think it's because at part I found it a little bit young, but the second book, I don't think I found that as much. It's still YA, obviously, so it's still like aimed at teenagers. I think it's mainly because in the first book there is a side character, and obviously it's aimed for teenagers, so like they don't swear, which is fine, but she just says like the most annoying things. Like she'll be like, mother faxer, and I'm like, just don't say the swear word. If you can't say the swear word in the book, just omit it. Don't say it. Like don't tried to say it in like a quirky way because she's so quirky. So yeah, she really irritated me, and she's not really in the second book. She is a little bit. She does come into the second book, but she really irritated me in the first book, so maybe that's why I preferred the second book. I don't know. I don't know if it's just because the stakes were higher or I knew the characters better or what it was, but I loved the second book. I ended up giving it a 4.5 out of 5. So yeah, absolutely loved it. Great ride. I haven't read the third book yet, so I don't know if as a trilogy I can vouch for it, but I will let you know when I read the third book. I probably will read the third book this year, I think, because now that I've read 2, I'm like, I just need one more, and then I completed the trilogy. There are also like a couple of other books that are set in the same universe, but the way I kind of see it is it's like that's the trilogy, and then they've got a couple of like other books that are more to do with the brothers. So yeah, so I'm kind of like, I will consider myself as like completing the series if I finish the trilogy, and then I'll read the other book separately. But yeah, so if you're looking for a new YA series to get into, I would definitely recommend that one because the second book was amazing. The next book I read was Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings, and I have thoughts, and please don't hate me. I know that Magnolia Parks is people's like absolute favourite book of all time, and I didn't mind it. I'm gonna say I didn't mind it. I definitely didn't love it, but I didn't mind it, and I'm willing to continue the series to see what happens next, because I know that this series is people's like ride or die series. They absolutely love it. If you don't know what Magnolia Parks is about, basically the Magnolia Parks universe is a collection of books, and they're basically following like 2 plots, but they're all in the same universe. So you have the Magnolia Parks books, which follow Magnolia and BJ, and then you have the Daisy Hates books, which follow Daisy and Christian. And those are the 2 like romance things that are going on. So Magnolia Parks is the first book in the series, and then the next book is a Daisy Hates book. But you kind of like see the other characters, like specifically in Magnolia Parks, you see Christian quite a bit, and you kind of like know about Daisy, but she doesn't really feature that much in Magnolia Parks. And I'm assuming the same kind of happens like as the series go on, you kind of hear about these other characters and what they're up to. Yeah, it's very much like one couple, the other couple, one couple, the other couple. And yeah, this is people's absolute favourite. People absolutely ride or die for this series. So I was curious, and I read Magnolia Parks, and it was okay. It was fine. I didn't hate it. I know some people absolutely hate these books. I didn't hate it. It was entertaining in parts. It was interesting in parts. For me, it was just too long. I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5 because I did actually like some of it. It's kind of like these young adults, and it's very much like elite London society. So in Magnolia Parks, you follow Magnolia and BJ, and they both dated when they were teenagers. They were together for several years, and they end up splitting up because BJ cheats on Magnolia. And they kind of then just have this never really get over each other thing where they're both obsessed with each other. They both want to get back together, but they're miscommunicating all the time, and they still see each other all the time, like not in a sexual way, but they're still like very good friends, and they like sleep over each other's houses, and it's all like very messy. But Magnolia is always like dating someone. She's always got another guy on her arm, so she's always like in a relationship with someone else, even though they're mainly like fake relationships. And then BJ is always sleeping around, like he's always sleeping with some model or some girl, whatever. So they just have this like massive miscommunication trope, and they both kind of want to get back together. But for Magnolia, her main thing is she doesn't know why he cheated on her, and he refuses to tell her who he cheated on her with. Like she has some ideas, but whenever she says that, he's always like, no, it's not her, but he doesn't tell her who. So she's like, give me something. For me, I didn't dislike the book. I think the book itself was fine, like the plot was fine, but it was just too long. It was really, really long. I think it was like 400 odd pages. It just did not need to be that long. Definitely could have been cut by like at least 100 pages because I just found it to be a little bit repetitive. And there's not much that really happens in this book. Like, to be honest, it's very much like no plot, just vibes. I do still want to continue the series. I've heard like some people prefer Daisy Hates over Magnolia Parks, like that kind of like those couples. So I probably will still continue the series. And I know that it supposedly gets better as well. People like the first books are like really frustrating, but it gets really, really good. So yes, I probably will still continue the series at some point. It's not really that high on my list, I'm not going to lie. But if enough of you tell me to continue the series, I will. I'm probably going to continue it anyway, but yes. The next book I read was a really, really short book called Foster by Claire Keegan. And if you're familiar with Claire Keegan's work, she does write like very, very short books that really pack a punch. So if you're looking for really, really short books to get your reading goal up, look for Claire Keegan because she has quite a few books like that. I already read Small Things Like This last year. I really, really loved it. One of my people in my book club initially picked Foster as a book to read for book club, but ended up picking something else because they were like, it was just too short to kind of like do a book club around. But it was on my radar anyway, so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna read it anyway because I've been wanting to read it. And it just really snuck up on me. I love Claire Keegan's writing. She's a very, very good writer, and she's very good at writing, like, I wouldn't say they're no plot, just vibes. Like, they're very, very quiet books. Not much really happens, but they really creep up on you and they just gut punch you. Like, by the end, I was like, wow, what a book. Very, very short. I think it's actually only like 80 pages long or something. Very, very short. And honestly can be read within like a few hours. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. It basically follows a young girl who basically gets sent to live with strangers for a summer. And that's basically it. It's all just about her relationship with those strangers and how she like sees the world as a young girl, and how, yeah, very, very fascinating, very interesting. You also get to know the strangers and get to like see their life. Just like very, very sweet. She kind of like comes from a very, very busy family. Like her mum, the reason why she actually goes to stay with them is because the mum is expecting another baby, and she's like, I just need a bit of help, to be honest, because I just don't have capacity to like look after another child at the moment. So she basically gets sent to live with this older couple. And yeah, just a really, really lovely book if you're looking for a really short read that just is very heartwarming and kind of breaks your heart a little bit. I would recommend it. It's very, very sweet and yeah, very, very easy to read, very quick to read, and yeah, really, really does pack a punch considering it's so short. The next book I read was another book that was on my physical TBR, and that was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I was like, I need to get into my summer reading because it's summer now, and I was like, I need to read a summer book. And I've wanted to read Book Lovers for ages. I've had it on my physical TBR for a while because my friend got it for me, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I don't even understand why I loved it so much. I don't know if it's a combination of, I did read it whilst I was on holiday. I'll admit that. So maybe my rating is skewed, but I absolutely loved it. I think it's my favourite Emily Henry so far. I need to reread You and Me on Vacation because honestly, it's close between the two. But I ended up giving this 5-star. Spoiler alert, I gave it a 5-star because I absolutely loved it. It basically follows Nora, who's a literary agent, and she and her sister decide to go on a small town holiday together because her sister is pregnant and expecting another child. And she's basically like, oh, please can we just like get a holiday away together because this is like the last time I'm going to have a bit of like peace and quiet before the baby comes. So they basically decide to go on a month-long holiday to this cute little small town. She basically ends up bumping into kind of like a rival. I wouldn't really say it's a rival, but she ends up bumping into someone that she knows there, and romance slowly ensues. And oh my god, I loved it. I think this is like my favourite couple ever. I think this is my favourite like romance couple. I just loved them. I loved the male main character so much. I thought he was just like, if you like acts of service and words of affirmation, you're going to love this book. You're going to love this main character. You're going to love him because that is basically like his whole thing, acts of service and words of affirmation, and it's amazing. It felt very like rom-com-esque because you're in this like small town. They kind of go there and they have this bucket list and they're like, oh, we're gonna sleep outside and we're gonna stroke a horse and we're gonna save a local business, and they're kind of doing all these things that like come from a small town romance, and I ate it up. I absolutely loved it. I ended up giving it 5 stars. I just absolutely loved it. I really liked all the characters. I loved the setting. I thought the setting was really good. And I just mainly loved the romance. The romance between the two main characters was probably my favourite romance I've ever read. And yeah, I think this is my favourite romance book I've ever read. So yeah, if you have any recommendations for more books like Book Lovers, I still want to read like more of Emily Henry's books because I have a few others. I have Funny Story on my Kindle and Happy Place as well. So I really want to read those two probably this summer as well, to be honest, because I'm obsessed. Now on to my most recent book that I read, which was James by Percival Everett. This is a retelling of Huckleberry Finn, but it's from Jim's perspective, but he goes by James in this book. I really, really enjoyed this. I don't know if it kind of fell a little bit flat because I think I was just in a bit of a slump. I think whenever I finish a 5-star book, I really struggle to get back on the bandwagon, and this was around the time that I DNF'd Butter, so I was already kind of like in a bit of a slump because I DNF'd Butter and then I was reading James, and I don't know if I liked it as much as I maybe would have liked it if I'd have read it at a different time, but I did still rate it a 3.5. I did still enjoy it. I really, really loved the character of James. I thought James was a very interesting character. It's set in like the late 1800s, and it was just very interesting to kind of read a book from the perspective of a slave. I don't think I've read any books from the perspective of a slave, so I really valued reading that and kind of like seeing his perspective, especially on even just like the way he would speak and the way he would navigate education and the way he had to kind of, he would always be thinking one thing, but he'd have to say something else to stay safe and stay alive. And it very much was like a survival story from James's perspective. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very well written. I did find it a little bit slow at times, like especially the start of the book. I found it quite slow to get into, but again, I don't know if that's just because I was in a bit of a slump anyway, and maybe that's why I found it a little bit slow to get into. I did listen to it on audio, pretty much the entire thing, and I really liked the audiobook. I thought the audiobook was very good. I think especially because the way that it's written is very much written the way that it would be spoken, so like reading the language, I think some of the way that it's written, especially if you're not American, but especially if you kind of don't speak with that dialect, it could be quite difficult to follow, kind of like the way that Trainspotting's written, where it's kind of like written in a Scottish accent. It's very much written in an accent, so I found the audiobook a little bit easier to digest because obviously the person speaks it in the accent, so you can literally like understand it very well. I think one of my only gripes was, one, like I said, I found it a little bit slow at times, and two, I found the ending very sudden, and yeah, it kind of just came out of nowhere. It just ended, and I was like, oh, okay. I didn't realize we were getting to the end. I didn't realize that was the ending. So I think I would have rather the ending felt a little bit more final, or at least like a little bit more, maybe even like an epilogue, or I don't know. The ending for me was like a little bit disappointing because it was just so sudden, and I felt like I really was just like listening, and then it just stopped, and I was like, okay. I did enjoy this book. It's just probably not the sort of book that I would reread. I think it did just take me a little while to like get into it. The problem is when you're such a mood reader, and even just rating books in general, I feel like your mood and like where you're at with your life really affects how you rate books. So this sort of book, like, I mean, I'm not rating it lowly. I gave it like a 3.5 out of 5, but I don't know if it would have been more like a 4 out of 5 if I'd have read it at a different time. If it's kind of on your radar as a book to read, I'd recommend, especially in the summer. It's kind of like set during summer, so I think it's like a nice summer book to read if you want to read something a little bit different. It's quite depressing, obviously. It was really, really interesting and very like thought-provoking. But those are the 11 books that I read over the last 4 months. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you liked hearing about them and seeing my ratings and kind of like how I found them. I really appreciate people still being subscribed. I know I've been like really inconsistent, but consistency is coming, hopefully one day. But yeah, I really hope you like this video. Feel free to comment down below any of your thoughts, and obviously give this video a like if you liked it. And as always, subscribe. It's free to subscribe. If you like my channel and you want to see more of my content, do subscribe to my channel because it does help me. And liking the video also helps me a lot because it pushes it out to the algorithm. I really hope you enjoy, and I'll hopefully see you in my next video. Bye!